Hello, dear students. I am Samir Velankar. I welcome all of you to this fourth video on structures in C. Now, in the first three videos, we saw what is structure, how to declare a structure, how to make variables of structure type, and we have also seen type def declaration, which is an alternate way in which you can declare a structure. Using type def, we actually make a new data type which can be used for declaring variables. Now, in this video, we are going to learn how to initialize a structure. Now, as an example, I have taken a structure called point here. Now, everybody knows that a point in Cartesian plane contains two things, x and y, x coordinate and y coordinate. So, a point can be thought as a record. Every point has x coordinate, y coordinate. So we can declare point as a record. So we have declared struct point, and every point, notice this open brace and close brace followed by semicolon. Every point has two members, x and y, of float type. Now declaring this structure, you know that declaring this structure is not enough, because declaring the structure called point has only created a data type called struct point. You have to make variables. By the way, here point is a user defined data type, isn't it? From earlier videos we know. This struct is group of two fields or members, which are float x and float y. But right now there aren't any variables stored in the memory. So the variable of point type can be declared as struct point. Check this line, struct point p1. We read p1 is a variable of point type where point itself is a structure. So p1 in the memory can be thought of like this. P1 is a structure, is a record stored in the memory as a block, and it has two members x and y. P1 will have two members x and y because point is a structure and point has two members x and y. We can instantly initialize p1 as in the curly brace open and curly brace close, giving the values separated by comma. So the first value obviously will be the value of first member x, and second value will be the value of second member x, the second member y. So in this case, x will be 10.2 and y will be 7.8.2. So that's the way how you initialize a structure. While declaring a structure variable, you can equate it to curly braces. Within the curly brace, you can give values separated by comma. Similarly, over here, P2 is another variable of struct point type. So P2 is also stored in the memory as a block, and P2 also has x and y because P2 is of point type, and P2's x will be 3.1 and P2's y will be minus 9.2. So that's the way how we have declared P2 as a variable of point type, and we have also initialized it by giving values inside the curly braces. Now observe P3 is another variable of struct point type. So P3 is there in the memory as a block, and P3 also contains x and y, but we have not initialized P3. So P3's x and y, these two members, will be there in the memory under P3, but these variables or these members will store garbage value. As you know, if a variable in C language is not initialized, then it is loaded with garbage value in case it is an auto variable. And you know P3 is an auto variable because it will be declared under some open brace and close brace. Now note here that P3 cannot be initialized later on. Now you have already declared P3, correct? And suppose after declaring P3, you have a second thought that now later on I want to initialize P3. So you will be driven to write this line, P3 is equal to curly braces 2.2 4.2, thinking that now 2.2 will be stored in x and 4.5 will be loaded in y. But this line will produce an error. This is wrong because structure variables can be initialized only during declaration. So if you have not initialized P3 during declaration, then you have missed a chance of initializing P3. Of course, later on you can input P3 from keyboard using scanf, but you cannot initialize P3 using curly braces. So the point is, after the declaration of P3 will produce an error. Hence, if you try to initialize, if you try to initialize after declaration of P3 will produce an error. Hence, struct variable can be initialized only during declaration. Here P1 and P2 variables is initialized, whereas P3 variable will be stored with garbage values because you have not initialized P3. Okay. So the diagram of P1 again in the memory will be P1 is like a block and P1 will have x and y, and note the value of x is 10.2 and value of y is 7.8. But you very well know in the memory there is nothing like a block like this. Actually memory is a sequence of bytes. So P1 will be stored somewhere in the memory, byte after byte. Maybe P1 starts at location 100. Then first 4 bytes, assuming float consumes 4 bytes, first 4 bytes will be for x and next 4 bytes. So this location will be 103, sorry, 100 and, 105, 104, I am so sorry, because 100, 101, 102, 103 will be for x 4 bytes, and 104 onwards you can store y. So this sequence of bytes, sequence of 8 bytes is actually P1. Similar goes for P2. But for our convenience, as in the earlier videos, I said that we simply show it P2 or P1 or P3 as a block containing two members x and y. And as you see, x has been initialized to 3.1 of P2 and y has been initialized to minus 9.2. So x is 3.2 and y is minus 9.2. Definitely P2 will have some address. Maybe P2 is loaded at address 200, then the first 4 bytes, that is 200, 200, 201, 202, 203, first 4 bytes will be where X will be stored and next 4 bytes will be where Y will be stored. Alright, now some more things. There is alternate way of initializing a structure, not an alternate way actually. Just check this declaration. You know you have come from the earlier videos. We are still declaring a struct point which has two members, x and y of type float. And while we end the structure declaration here, we usually give semicolon, isn't it, at this point? But we have instantly declared a variable. So how do you read this? P1 is a variable of point type. So you don't have to write that line struct point P1 comma P2 comma P3. While you end the struct declaration, then and there you can declare a variable. And while declaring a variable P1, you can also initialize it by writing equal to values inside the curly brace, putting a comma and declaring more variables like this. P2 is also a variable of point type, which is initialized, and P3 is another variable of point type but not initialized, so it will be loaded with garbage values. So here P1, P2, P3 are struct variables of point type declared immediately after struct point declaration. So that's also the way you can initialize a structure. Now before we end this video, check the following method is invalid to initialize a structure. One might feel that anyway we are declaring point structure and point has x and y. So why don't you initialize float x equal to 10.5 here itself and y equal to 5.6? Now, you all know that when we declare a float variable, we can initialize it. But this type of initialization of struct members is wrong. The reason behind it is point is not a variable. Please try to understand this. Only variables can be initialized. Now, the thing is, if you write int x, think of this, and equal to 10, whom are you initializing? You are initializing variable x. But there is nothing called initializing int. Int is just a data type. Like that, point is a data type here, and how can you initialize members of a data type? So the above initialization of x and y is invalid because we cannot we have not created any variable. So when you create a variable like p1 of point type, p1 has x and y, two members, and x and y of p1 can be initialized. Okay, that's it. More on this structure, more in detail we will learn about structures in the next video.